Hello and welcome to the Pregame Network News Hole, a series where we recap a few things we heard from throughout the week. Not necessarily everything and all the big news you'd expect, but a few things we heard and thought were interesting. This episode is for the week of September 11th, 2022. Let's get started. The week was dense with announcements and showings as Tokyo Game Show was underway, and on the side we had a Nintendo Direct and a State of Play from Sony. Nintendo came out swinging with a title reveal and some gameplay for the Breath of the Wild sequel, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, a previously leaked title, Fire Emblem Engage, and Pikmin 4, all of which will be releasing in 2023. From Sony, we got another look at the upcoming God of War Ragnarok, and some showcases for other third-party titles like action game Project Eve, which is now titled Stellar Blade. Not to be left out, Microsoft used the opening of Tokyo Game Show to talk about some exciting potential partnerships in Japan and some new immediate additions to Game Pass, with titles like Ni no Kuni Remastered, Wo Long Final Dynasty, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Metal Hellsinger. There were plenty more things to see between all the shows, from promising new titles like Sin Duality, Octopath Traveler, and Rise of the Ronin, to previously announced titles like Exoprimal, Bayonetta 3, and Sonic Frontiers. We also saw updates to existing games like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, and Resident Evil Village Gold Edition. We also saw plenty of remakes and remasters, like the Suikoden series, Tales of Symphonia, Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, GoldenEye 007, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, and Like a Dragon Ishin. There were even more beyond what I mentioned, but there were two that stood out as a sign of some potential meta revitalization in a stagnating genre. At the beginning of Sony's State of Play, we finally got our first look at in-engine footage of Tekken 8. As brief as it was, it showcased the series' first exclusive steps onto next-generation consoles with Unreal Engine 5, something that Tekken lead Katsuhiro Harada would later elaborate on. The game will be a turning point in many ways. Graphically, the game will be a fresh start with most of the original assets that have been with the series for years being scrapped completely and built from scratch for the new engine. While the story will see a showdown between Jin and Kazuya, the last of the Mishima bloodline, the ramifications of which will have a lasting impact on whatever is next for the series. On the gameplay front, he remained mostly quiet, but it would appear that they will play it relatively safe, expanding on existing mechanics while carefully recreating what players are used to for this new entry. And so far, it looks promising. The second of the two showings, and one of the strongest from the week, was Street Fighter VI, with its largest pre-release event yet, which unveiled its single-player content, showed off some newly revealed fighters, and dumped a ton of new footage through multiple outlets. World Tour, the game's single-player mode, will have players make their own character and make their way through a globe-trotting story about finding what strength really means, featuring many classic characters which you can train with to learn moves, and along the way there will be locations like Metro City to explore and side activities to take part in. In the game proper, Ken, Dhalsim, Blanca, and E Honda will all be making their return, with plenty of new tools added to their classic movesets. During these announcements, it was stated that the game would launch with 18 characters, with veterans Zangief, Cammy, and DJ still to be shown along with a few new characters. There was no mention of Rashid, Ed, Akuma, and the remaining leaked characters from earlier in the year, though it is safe to assume that even if they aren't present on launch day, they won't be far behind. Also shown was the Battle Hub, an interactive in-game lobby. While these kind of lobbies have been notoriously hit or miss in the past, mostly thanks to Arc System Works, it will be the first time something like this is attempted by a modern AAA fighting game and will offer multiple features. Players can use their created character to interact with others, play in various types of matches, and even sample some older Capcom classics on arcade cabinets. We potentially won't have to wait long to sample these new features, as during the event, a crossplay-enabled closed beta was announced, with sign-ups available now on the official website. Potential players will be able to sample the full spread of online modes, as well as just mess around in training mode when the beta launches on October 7th. While there are a few things to be ironed out and left to be seen, with Street Fighter and Tekken returning, and with SNK getting back into the swing of high-budget game development, things are looking up for the fighting game genre, which for the past few years has been dominated by a handful of antiquated titles and an influx of casual anime fighters, with a few standouts in between. As to whether or not this will result in a healthier fighting game community, on the other hand, well, it will probably take more than this. The Call of Duty Next event was finally held this week, and in between the awkward structure of having match commentators also handle info drops and live matches shown by quote-unquote professionals with no decorum, we were able to find out some new information about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2.0. There was also info on Warzone Mobile, but I really don't care. And the format of this train wreck was so abysmal, I couldn't be bothered to go looking. The event led with the Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer reveal, which showed a little bit of everything within the core systems, and a few surprising additions to modes. As far as how the game plays, it's much the same as Modern Warfare 2019, but with a slight bump in speed and new movement options. Ledge hanging has been added as an option while mantling, and swimming will be returning as well. Sliding also returns, but with added delay to shooting, likely to curtail some of the more annoying animation canceling tendencies that sprung up during the last era of Call of Duty. And a secondary dive maneuver has been added as an alternative. On the environment side, overall map design has been improved, with smaller maps designed from the ground up around 6v6 gameplay. Larger maps, known as battle maps, will serve as the battlefield for larger ground war modes and have been confirmed to be points of interest featured in Warzone 2's new map. Also featured in Ground War and Warzone is the addition of multiple new vehicles that players will be able to move around within and lean out of with greater control than before. With weapons, Gunsmith 2.0 was revealed, showcasing the weapon platform system that will have players unlock not just individual weapons, but different receivers that fundamentally change weapons within each platform, effectively turning most weapons into a possible handful in different classes. Players have the opportunity to purchase packages called Weapon Vaults, an extension of the previous blueprint system that gave special visual variants. Vaults serve the same purpose, but with the added benefit of unlocking all attachments within a platform and giving a unique version of each for greater customization. In the process of creating new custom weapons, players will have the opportunity to test them pre-game in the returning firing range. To end multiplayer, there were a few new modes. While there are some smaller ones to be mentioned, the two most interesting would be the new Invasion mode and the return of third-person mode from the original Modern Warfare 2. Invasion will utilize the same battle maps mentioned previously and is designed to be a massive full-scale war, filled with enemy combatants of 20 players and 20 AI opponents in a giant push across the map. While there isn't much to be said about third-person mode, as it explains itself, I should mention it does handle rather well, to the point where I'd argue it competes with actual third-person shooters, and with some additional tweaking, it could lead to an interesting branch within the game and possibly the series. Warzone 2 is very much in the same boat of more of the same but better. All the gameplay improvements, vehicle additions, and gunsmith changes will carry over when players drop into the new map Al Mazrah, the largest in the series yet, with more ways to get around, especially with the new water traversal options. But what changes exclusively here are the Battle Royale elements and elements from Warzone 1. Players still have to fight their way to the end of a match as a sweeping cloud of gas shrinks the playable area, but this time, prior to the final circle, the battlefield will be split into 3 separate shrinking areas that will converge on each other, forcing a different late-game strategy. During the game proper, players will also have the option of attacking AI-held strongholds, but those worried about AI interference shouldn't be, as Infinity Ward stressed that the AI will not actively engage players unless engaged first. But those who choose to do so will be treated to challenging opponents and impressive loot rewards. During the looting build-up, what you can find and buy will be a bit different. Lethal and tactical equipment are more commonly found and can sometimes be purchased at the buy station, alongside existing familiar equipment like killstreaks, gas masks, and squad buybacks. But instead of loadout drops, players will only be able to purchase individual weapons from their arsenal, and perks altogether are not planned for Warzone 2 at launch. The Gulag makes a return too, only this time instead of 1v1 cage matches, players will be placed into 2v2 struggles that involve looting in a multi-level map while attempting to bring down a boss called the Jailer. Acquiring his key will allow players back into the Warzone with the loot they acquired from that match. Overall, Warzone 2 looks to be taking the same approach as Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer, with experimental changes and big additions aimed at speeding up the pace and filling in the lulls in between battle. Aside from everything else, Modern Warfare 2 will feature an improved 2-player Special Ops mode that follows the story of Modern Warfare 2, as well as a new 3-player raid mode that has heavy focus on cooperation, strategy, and puzzle solving. But one more mode remains. The main passion project from Infinity Ward will be the mysterious DMZ mode, which will have more information revealed closer to release, but is rumored to feature RPG-styled looting with a persistent inventory within Warzone 2.0. While there's still just a bit more to be revealed, Modern Warfare 2's release is just a month away. Players can get their hands on multiplayer now for a limited time through various beta testing periods that started on PlayStation consoles and will run at various times until the 26th. At the very end of the week, a plethora of videos showing a development build of Grand Theft Auto 6 leaked online. The 90 or so short videos were taken from what appears to be an older debug build, and previewed or tested various assets and features. From things as basic as character animations like crouching, going prone, crawling, bracing under fire, carrying bodies, handing camera reactions to dominant hand switching, and swimming. to some of the more complex details, like a fairly advanced car system that emulated features like pedal movement and reclining seats, as well as details we will likely see in vehicle customization or generation. While there was plenty to be seen, in the end it was just a collection of debug footage that doesn't necessarily tell you or show you everything the game has to offer, and there's only so much to say about something like 3 minutes of AI test footage. But there are a few things that could be noted from what we saw. Most of the footage featured two protagonists, under the names Jason and Lucia, confirming the long-running rumor of a female protagonist, as well as lending some small potential credit to an earlier story leak teasing a Bonnie and Clyde type plot. The locales we saw in the footage also gave us a good look at the world in progress, with various different peaks at a modern-day rundown Vice City, confirming the setting and time frame. Finally, the build was built for last-gen consoles, all but confirming a cross-gen release. Aside from that, we can glean some of the returning, if unsurprising, improved systems, like cover-based shooting, clothing customization, the option to rob stores or individual NPCs, Red Dead Redemption 2's NPC interaction options, and being able to switch between playable protagonists at any time. Overall, the game appears rough around the edges, although it looks to be at least targeting the polish and detail that the company has been known for since 2008. But given some of the announcements surrounding changes in staff and policy over the years, many players were left wondering if the satire, quality, and tone would be left intact. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to say on the topic, aside from their antagonist being identified as far-right extremists, and a few bit of dialogue that involved your stereotypical Floridian redneck spouting social media-led conspiracies about Chinese spying. There's not a whole lot to go on, but take that for what you will. Ultimately, with a massive narrative-driven sandbox game like Grand Theft Auto, the only way to judge it will be the complete experience, or previews closer to release. Things like returning functions or what the arsenal will be aren't necessarily interesting or consequential like it would be for other games. And on top of that, there are no drastic changes from Grand Theft Auto 5 to be found anywhere. So we will have to continue waiting to see exactly how the game will shape up near the end, and whether or not it lives up to the massive reputation behind it and the scrutiny in front of it. In the meantime, everyone involved appears to be outraged, with early impressions not being so great, and things spiraling out of control. Online communities are already infighting on what exactly the footage represents and what it means for the game. Reports are saying the team of defeated, dejected developers are devastated at the leak. Meanwhile, late-to-the-game journalists and influencers, upset to have missed a scoop, are already grandstanding for the devs after taking the moral high ground against any criticism. Topping it all off is the mounting aggressive legal action from Take-Two, as claims are spreading that there were other things leaked, such as internal development documents for the game, the source code for Grand Theft Auto 5, employee personal information, and potentially the source code for Grand Theft Auto 6. While it's highly unlikely that the game will have extravagant behind-the-scenes changes, insiders are already alluding to this development potentially affecting the workflow for the developers. But let's be honest, if Rockstar's bloated development cycles were anything to go by, they were likely looking for a way to avoid working anyway. And now, some smaller stories from throughout the week. Square Enix and Platinum's co-venture Babylon's Fall was announced to be shutting down in February, surprising everyone with the fact that it had even come out. The ill-fated PlayStation 5 title released to little fanfare 6 months ago, where it was quickly panned for being a boring loot-grinding action RPG, tethered to a live service, and smothered in microtransactions and full-price DLC packages, despite launching at and maintaining a full $60 price point. At the time of the announcement, all major events have been cancelled and in-game currency sales have ceased, but the team promises to continue supporting the game while showing players gratitude through in-game events, which clearly makes up for the disastrous life the game led. Lastly, Halo Captors 343 began restructuring after it lost tenured studio head Bonnie Ross, when she announced she would be stepping away from the company and Microsoft as a whole to tend to a family medical issue. She was with both companies for a total of 18 years. In her wake, many within the company were shuffled around in various roles, and in the end, Pierre Heinz, one of the men responsible for some of the Master Chief Collection's major updates, was moved into her spot. Things continue to not look so good for 343 or Halo. Prior to this shakeup, every single piece of planned content for the game had been delayed or cancelled. The next major update, which was planned to launch in August, won't be out until November. And the local split-screen mode was cancelled altogether, despite being playable through menu manipulation. We continue to wonder if things will ever straighten out for the company, and if this latest entry will ever get some goddamn content. And that does it for another week of the Pregame Network News Hole. If you encounter anything you think we'd find interesting throughout the following weeks, send it our way. Thank you for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.